I wanted to share something with you that really shocked me when I learned about it. There is a specific condition that is well recognized by the CDC and many major medical institutions around the world. And this condition is where tapeworm larvae, they leave the digestive tract, they move into the blood, they move and cross the blood-brain barrier. They cause inflammation in the central nervous system, they cause lesions, and they cause many of the symptoms that we would recognize with multiple sclerosis, but other neurological diseases also. And this is really well established in science. It's well understood all over the world. But the sad reality is that virtually no MS patients are ever tested for this type of parasite in their central nervous system. Today, I'm going to share with you why this is so important that we talk about this subject and why we start to look for this parasite in not just MS patients, but other people that have different types of neurological diseases. If we haven't met, my name is Pam Bartha, and I'm the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 37 years ago. The sad reality is that today we know very little more about MS than we did 40 years ago when I was diagnosed. We still don't know what causes MS. There is no cure, and people are suffering terribly. They are losing their life. They're dying prematurely. They're living in care homes. There's one beautiful young lady in our area here, and she's in her 20s, and she's been in a care home for years, and it just breaks my heart. And so this is why it's really important that I'm sharing all this research with you to help you to see that there is a real cause of multiple sclerosis and other chronic diseases. This is going to be this video that I'm sharing with you right now, this live event, if you're joining me live, and it's really helping to paint the picture of what multiple sclerosis truly is. And this goes for other diseases also. It is an infectious disease. We are going through several part series. In the first part, I just talked in general about how MS is an infectious disease. Then we talked about multiple sclerosis studies finding fungus in the central nervous system. Then we talked about over 100 years of research linking Lyme infections, especially the spirochete that causes Borrelia that causes Lyme disease, and how that has been documented in MS for about over 100 years. Then we talked about this protozoa, which is a type of single cell parasite that infects red blood cells. It's a malaria babesia-like parasite, and it causes the vascular disorder that we're seeing in MS, and this is where the research is really going. And then we talked last week about large roundworms that are found in MS, and a lot of our students have passed roundworms. I've passed roundworms. Today we're going to talk about tapeworms. And before I go any further, you're probably wondering, yeah, right, Pam, like we can have all these parasites inside of us. That just seems so unreal. Like, how is that even possible? If you have ever had a garden, right, and you're trying to get your vegetables or your flowers to grow, do you just have one type of weed, the pests that try to take over? You have multiple different types of weeds that grow in a garden. And that is the same thing inside of us with our microbiome, the microbes that live in our body. When we lose our natural defense, the health-promoting microbes, we are susceptible to whatever parasites are in our environment. That comes from our food. It comes from the working in the soil. It can come from our pets and from our loved ones and on and on. They're part of the environment. So for many of us like myself, I'll talk about it later, I was on lots of antibiotics and I was on a farm. I was exposed to lots of parasites. So I really became susceptible to having a very significant disruption. So today we're going to talk about not just like how parasites like tapeworms can infect our intestines, but also how they migrate and they move to the central nervous system and how this is well established in science. And it is a really common parasite in the world, and it's just ignored in the developed countries, which is really sad. So the key point is that this condition that is caused by tapeworm larvae, which are the immature part or form of tapeworms, it's well recognized by the CDC. It has a special name, neurocysticercosis. NCC. I'll be referring it to as NCC. I'll probably just still call it neurocysticercosis. And make sure to type your questions in the Q&A box and let me know if you think that this could possibly be one of the parasites that you are plagued with. MS is not caused by one specific parasite. There will never be a single magic cure. I wish there was, but it's not that easy. Again, it is a disruption in our microbiome. The scientific name for that is called, let me know if you follow my work, you might know it starts with a D, dysbiosis. And dysbiosis means we're out of balance. We have too many disease-causing parasites, and we have not enough health-promoting microbes that would protect us from these parasites. And there are 4 major categories of parasites. And a parasite is any microbe that lives in our body and causes us harm. So we've talked about fungus before, molds and yeast. We've talked about the protozoa, which are not like bacteria, they're different. And that would be like the Malaria babesia type, but there's Giardia, there's many other types of the protozoa that are parasites to humans. And then we also talked about one particular bacteria, which is the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, and that's really significant with MS and other neurological diseases. And so that would be a bacteria. And then the other one, so there's worms, which we are just starting to go into talking about them. We talked about the large roundworms. And if you didn't watch that event last week, make sure to go back to the video. It's quite shocking how there is like this link between having pets when you're a child and then a much higher risk of MS, maybe other diseases too, but definitely multiple sclerosis. There's this huge trail of evidence. So today we're going to talk about tapeworms. And I'm not saying that this is the only cause of MS, but this can be a very common cause of our neurological symptoms, part of what's driving the MS for sure, because it is so common and it's so well understood in the science and in the medical institutions. These worms, they can be huge, like the tapeworms in our gut, but then the larvae, of course, moving into the central nervous system can cause a lot of damage. So what is neurocysticercosis? By definition, it is when the tapeworm larva, the immature form of the tapeworm, they enter into the central nervous system. And they usually live in cysts. It looks like a little bladder or like a little balloon almost. And this is the immature forms of them in there. And they have been observed as they can see the hooklets, those little claws that they hold on to attach on the host. And so this is a really well understood. You can actually watch videos online, and I have veterinarians that are removing these little sacs from the brains of domestic animals, whether it's sheep or goats. And it's crazy because those animals, they have symptoms identical to what we would experience with multiple sclerosis. They open up their brain, they pull this disgusting thing out of their brain. It looks like a balloon, like a partially inflated balloon. And then they sew up the animal, and then the animal just is totally recovered. This is well understood by the CDC, the Cleveland Clinic, the Merck Manual, and many peer-reviewed neurological journals. It is considered the most common parasitic infection in humans, in the central nervous system of humans in the world. And it can be responsible for up to 30% of adult onset epilepsy. And it's called the great imitator because this infection in the brain, in the central nervous system, it mimics almost every other neurological condition. So in practice, neurocysticercosis could look indistinguishable from multiple sclerosis on MRIs and also by the symptoms, to the point that neurologists sometimes they cannot tell the difference between neurocysticercosis and multiple sclerosis. They have to have additional evidence, like the cysts, for example. We can become infected by the eggs that are from our pets. They can be infected with tapeworms, our dogs, our cats, any domestic animal. And then also in our soil. Maybe we love gardening, maybe we love spending time outside, and maybe there is some contaminated soil. Then also eating in restaurants. Maybe some of the produce has not been cleaned properly. Maybe somebody who's preparing our food has not washed their hands very well, and maybe they have tapeworms. And a lot of these worms can lay several 100,000 eggs at one time. So it's something that we were told by our standard of care practitioners that we don't have worms, we don't have parasites in developed countries. That's a third world or an underdeveloped world problem. And that is not true at all. They are equally present in Canada, the United States, and Africa. It's that we usually don't drink raw water, and sometimes they do. If we drank raw water, we would just get really sick also. So the parasites, the tapeworms, are present in Canada, in the United States, in every European country. Unfortunately, they are a pest. And so we will ingest the eggs somehow. I shared a few different examples of how we would become infected with the eggs. They do migrate down to the small intestine, and that's where they hatch. And then some of them might grow into large tapeworms in our intestine, but very often they will move out of the intestinal lining, move into the blood, and they migrate to different tissue, different organs. So we can have cysts, not just in the central nervous system, but we can have them in different organs also. So in the central nervous system, they are like, the cyst is like filled with fluid. It's like a little bladder or a little sac. And that protective sac around the larva of the tapeworm is what protects the tapeworm larva from the immune system. Because you might wonder, like, why isn't the immune system going after these little sacs, these little cysts? And well, when the sac is healthy, it's one of the ways that parasites make themselves blind to the immune system so that the immune system will not take them out. And what's so profound is Dr. Alan MacDonald, who's a pathologist. He was a very well-respected pathologist. He found multiple larvae in every MS, the tapeworm larva, in every MS subject that he tested. So the cyst walls that is protective for these little developing tapeworms from the immune system, and they can sit in our central nervous system for years without being detected, or in our tissue, and it could be in your liver or different organs or just muscle tissue. And so this is really interesting because this is an insight that I have observed with my students, because we've worked with thousands of people, helping them to recover from parasitic infestations that cause MS and other chronic diseases. But like when the parasite is healthy or when the sac is healthy, the immune system is quite blind to it. But it's when the sac starts to break down, because maybe you've had it for a few years, or maybe the worms start to become unhealthy and they can't evade the immune system as well. This is where the immune system almost wakes up to it and goes, oh my gosh, we've got to get this out of here. This is danger, danger. And then it's the immune response to those sacs, the little bladder sacs that are holding the tapeworm larva in the central nervous system. The immune system is going after it, and those are the symptoms that you're experiencing. And this is that waxing and waning of symptoms that we have with MS, and it would be the same with this neurocysticercosis. It's just so fascinating. Like the more years that I'm doing this, the more I see these really wonderful explanations, understanding, deeper understanding, and the more we understand these parasites, the quicker we can recover from them. So this inflammation means that your immune system is fighting something. It is fighting an invader. And today we're just talking about tapeworm larvae in the central nervous system, which is called neurocysticercosis. And so this flare of inflammation can actually be very similar to an MS flare, right? When we have the immune system just starting to really work hard. The war is like, what is it going after? What is its primary job? Is to defend us from infection. So there are basically 4 stages of cysts, of these larvae in the central nervous system, and this really parallels multiple sclerosis. Number 1, the cyst stage. So this is where the tapeworm larvae are living in these little bladder sac cysts, and they are healthy, they are alive, they are intact. The immune system largely ignores it, and we may have very few symptoms. Maybe a little fatigue or something, but nothing major, no major neurological symptoms. Then stage 2 is where these cysts, they start to break down. And as they break down, then this little wall, this bladder sac wall, can become leaky, and some material can leak out, And this is where the immune system starts to go, okay, what is going on here? What is this? This is not good. So this activates the immune system, and we can have a full inflammatory response. We can start getting edema. We can get inflammation. Edema means swelling. We can have symptoms that appear and get worse over time. And then eventually the immune system likes to kind of block this cyst off. It basically walls off the dying parasite. Granuloma is what it's called. So it forms a granuloma around the cyst. And then the cyst becomes calcified and it's dead, and calcium deposits remain behind. So how this parallels with multiple sclerosis directly, MS neurologists, they talk about enhancing lesions that are active, where we have active inflammation. They call those enhancing lesions, versus non-enhancing lesions, which would be inactive lesions. Well, for the neurocysticercosis, radiologists will talk about active viable cysts. So those are the inflammatory stage of the cyst. And then inactive calcified lesions, which are dead, and that would not be the inflammatory part. So then we have basic biological processes. Number one, we have the waxing and waning of symptoms in both neurocysticercosis and MS, right? We have the relapses with MS, and even with neurocysticercosis, you can have more symptoms, you can have less symptoms. MS is called this mysterious disease where the immune system is attacking our tissue for no reason, which is a theory. It has never been proven. And if they've been saying this for decades and they still have not found why the immune system is attacking our nerve tissue for no reason, I think that theory is old and it needs to be parked and buried, basically. Also, if our immune system is attacking our nerve tissue for no reason, how is it that people like myself and many others are recovering from multiple sclerosis? It wouldn't be possible because our immune system would keep attacking our nerve tissue. And so with MS, this mysterious immune flare, they don't know what triggers it. And with neurocysticercosis, it is a parasitic cyst going through its life cycle. So when it's a healthy cyst, there's less symptoms. When it's a dying cyst, it's not going to live in us forever. They can live for years, but when it starts to break down, just like when the worms start to die. So when people are really, this is my theory, when people are really infested with parasites, like advanced multiple sclerosis, what I have seen in our students is that we're passing hundreds and hundreds of worms. It's shocking that we can still be alive and host that many worms. But then if we've had this infestation for years, we're going to have healthy young worms. We're going to have old cronies that are on their way out. And I believe it's the old cronies that are causing more of the immune response because the immune system is not blind to them anymore. And I see that when our students are passing some of the older worms that were on the way out, like if our student was not taking any like black walnut or any herbs to make them dark, but if they're really dark, that signifies to me that the parasite is older and was on its way out. Whereas when they're starting to release some of the newer parasites that are not as old, those are more cream colored, like a light tan color. And so that would be the same thing with a cyst, this little bladder in the central nervous system. When it's healthy, then the immune system is not really reacting. But then when it starts to break down, that's when the immune system starts to go after it. There's at least 17 different ways that parasites cause immune dysfunction and inflammation in our body. That is scientifically known. The symptom overlap between multiple sclerosis and neurocysticercosis is truly amazing. So if we just look at neurological symptoms documented this isn't all of them, this is just a few. So neurological symptoms documented in neurocysticercosis, this is the tapeworm larva, little bladder, those little sacs in the brain or in the central nervous system. Looking at epilepsy, seizures, 70 to 90% of symptomatic neurocysticercosis in some series. So in certain studies, they found up to 70 to 90% symptomatic neurocysticercosis, people that are dealing with seizures and epilepsy. So it's really a common cause of seizures and epilepsy. Looking at severe chronic headaches, they're finding that neurocysticercosis could be involved in 30 to 50% across different scientific studies. Neurological symptoms such as weakness, sensory loss, visual changes, about 8 to 16% of cases are that it's documented that neurocysticercosis can cause these neurological symptoms. And then also increased pressure in our brain and swelling in the brain, and meningitis, about 12 to 30%. Gait abnormalities, ataxia, where we have impaired mobility, walking, speaking, swallowing, eye movement, poor coordination, involuntary movements. That also, and then brainstem dysfunction and spasticity. So this list I've just shared with you, let me know if you have some of those symptoms. I'm not saying you have tapeworms, but I'm saying that the neurocysticercosis, tapeworm larvae in the central nervous system can cause all of these. It's been documented in science. It's well known. It's not fringe. It is real science that they just know that it causes all these neurological symptoms in many, many people. Neuropsychiatric symptoms that can be caused by neurocysticercosis, documented in this condition. Depression is a big one. This is seen in 50% of outpatients in a specific study, and it was the most frequent psychiatric diagnosis in neurocysticercosis is depression, cognitive dysfunction, and dementia. This is documented in up to 20% of neurocysticercosis patients and some cohorts. And in some cases, this dementia is the only symptom a person has. They don't have any seizures. They don't have any neurological signs. And that makes me think of, some of my loved ones that my aunts and uncles, et cetera, that have had dementia. And could they have had tapeworm larvae in their brain? They could have, because if you have this dementia, you're not always going to get all the other neurological symptoms, which is, I think it depends where it's located, the degree that we have them, psychoses, paranoia, hallucinations, behavioral changes. That's only about up to 5% they've seen in these patients that have neurocysticercosis. So that's not as common, but the depression and the cognitive dysfunction, depression is probably the biggest one, and cognitive dysfunction and dementia, about 20%. So the key question to pose here is, how many people diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, dementia, or other different types of depression or psychoses could actually have a tapeworm infection in their central nervous system, in their brain? Let's move on to Dr. Alan MacDonald's finding. So Dr. Alan MacDonald is an American pathologist, and he is a fellow of the College of American Pathologists, very well respected, decades of dedication to pathology. And he took frozen autopsy spinal fluid samples from brain banks. So these were 10 people that had a diagnosis of MS and they died, and their remains were preserved in brain banks for research. He was the first person to look for this. These samples were collected from patients between 1984 and 2014, stored in a brain bank, never previously examined, never looked for parasites in the central nervous system. All of these people had confirmed MS. And so Dr. Alan MacDonald, he looked at that, and his findings were amazing. And it's important to note that the 2017 MacDonald criteria for how we diagnose and treat multiple sclerosis, they were not interested in looking in the spinal fluid to see if there are any infections or any parasites. They felt that there is no value in this. All right, so he looked at 10 patients, and in 10 out of 10 subjects, he found tapeworm larva cysts in their brains. In every single one of them, different multiple developmental stages, and the cyst sacs would have at least 2 to 8 immature larvae in them. He found lots of the hooklets, those disgusting little claws that they used to hold on. And in 2 out of the 10 subjects, he found developing tapeworm. So not just the little immature baby form, but the worms were starting to grow in the central nervous system of 2 out of the 10 subjects. And then he also found hatched eggs in 2 out of the 10 patients, all the subjects also. Not in 1, not in 2, but in every single MS subject that he looked at. And he is a very well-respected pathologist. Nobody has ever challenged his work. Nobody has ever looked. There really is no money in looking for parasites in the central nervous system because we've got all these wonderful immunosuppressive drugs. So the mainstream medicine, they already accept that tapeworm cysts in the central nervous system cause seizures, headaches, all kinds of neurological symptoms that we see in MS and other neurodegenerative diseases, gait problems, dementia, depression, psychoses, MS-like white matter lesions. And then MacDonald, Dr. Alan MacDonald, found those same cysts in every single MS subject that he tested, 100% of the MS spinal fluid samples that he examined. And then there is also peer-reviewed paper, and it's called Multiple Sclerosis and Neurocysticercosis, a Diagnostic Dilemma. So here they said that neurologists cannot reliably tell apart when they're looking at symptoms, when they're looking at MRI, they can't, or even at the spinal fluid, they cannot tell the difference if it's MS or if it's neurocysticercosis. That's how similar it is. So some patients have received both diagnoses. So they were diagnosed with neurocysticercosis and multiple sclerosis at different points of their journey. And Dr. Alan MacDonald's work is not an outlier. It is fitting into this whole picture of what is understood about tapeworm larvae neurocysticercosis by all the medical major institutes and government agencies all around the world. Like, this is well understood. And then Dr. Alan MacDonald finding them in the central nervous system, plus knowing that neurocysticercosis causes virtually identical symptoms to what we would see in MS, but other neurological diseases also. So how do we test for this? That's a really good question. Number one, you have to convince somebody to test you, which is sad. Somebody like Dr. Alan MacDonald would, but I do not believe that he is still with us, unfortunately. So CT scans, they might be able to detect calcified cysts, so the dead stages. MRI would be more sensitive to active inflammation, edema, possibly cysts. And then, none of our neurologists are experienced at looking for this. There's also antibody blood testing. So there's a EIBT, which is an enzyme-linked immunoelectrotransfer blot. This is the CDC's preferred test. There is ELISA. That's an enzyme-linked immunoassay. And the important thing to know, and this is really important, is so even if you get a stool test done and it does not show that you have tapeworm even in your intestines, please know that the vast majority of the current stool tests, even parasite tests, they don't even look for worms. We see this all the time. So number one, they usually don't look for worms. Number two, the testing is probably approximately 10% efficient at finding the parasites that we're dealing with. It's really low. It's to the point where I never recommend people to do it. I mean, if it doesn't cost you any money, go ahead and have it done. But it's not going to show up, unfortunately. And for most places, they're not even looking for these worms. So if you have a negative test, that doesn't mean you don't have tapeworm, and it doesn't mean you don't have this neurocysticercosis. You literally have to be working with practitioners that really have a lot of experience with neurocysticercosis, and they have, if they work with it a lot in patients, then they know what to look for and they have experience. So stool testing is not going to help you. There is something called energy testing, which is like an advanced muscle testing. Sometimes they have instruments that they use. Autonomic response testing, AMA, EAV. This is not an exact science. It can be a helpful piece of information. With our students, most of them don't do this anymore unless they have a practitioner that they really feel is very skilled at this and will give them meaningful information. Otherwise, it can be really confusing. It's not an exact science, I should say. And apparently, too, that if you really suspect you have tapeworms, make sure that you have an eye exam, because if you have cysts in the back of your eye, behind your eye, and you don't have them surgically removed, then when you start treating, you could potentially have damage to your eyes. So, and also with having, let's say, if they're looking at your spinal fluid, this is where maybe you can try to get your spinal fluid saved in a brain bank for future research, and we can try to find somebody else like Dr. Alan MacDonald that will continue this research. I really think that we need to do like public funding. So I think this is what the MS Society was supposed to be helpful for, to when we all did the bike rides and the runs and things to find a cure. They're not even talking about a cure anymore. So I think it's really important that we start to really direct the research, the money that we're donating, that it starts to go to researching these types of things. This is not complicated. Like Dr. Alan MacDonald didn't spend millions and millions of dollars looking at the spinal fluid of 10 MS subjects. Why has nobody proven him wrong? Because everybody is just wanting to research, like to look for the next newest immunosuppressive drug, maintenance drug that we're supposed to take for the rest of our life. So treatment is going to require a combination of parasite drugs. The herbs will not get the little bladder sacs out of the central nervous system. We need to use parasite drugs that cross the blood-brain barrier. And then if we have any history of seizures, talk with your practitioner about possibly using some type of steroid. That's what's recommended often to make sure we don't have this strong Herxheimer reaction in the central nervous system when the little sacs, they open up and the worms start dying, and you don't want an over-the-top immune response that could be really detrimental to our safety. Number one, it requires using parasite drugs that will cross the blood-brain barrier, but then we also want to treat the worms that are in our gut so that they don't send more babies into our central nervous system. It's really important that you are working with a practitioner, that you're working with somebody who's skilled at this. This is not something you can just do on your own. And really important to treat effectively. And what I've heard from doctors that understand this is that if you don't treat well enough, then you can have reinfection in the future, and you can end up with a tumor in your brain. You can end up with tumors in your liver. You can end up with tumors in your pancreas. So it is really important to treat this seriously. And I know it's frustrating because we don't have a lot of practitioners that understand this yet, but it is coming. More and more practitioners are interested in this, and it's our goal to help to share this word with them, what we've learned and all the research. This is not hard. We could really start to help people. We could help people recover in a much greater scale than what we're doing when we get all the practitioners, or even a large percentage of them understanding. So this is even true for integrated practitioners. They have very little experience with tapeworms and flukes and even roundworms. They know we have parasites, but they don't have good tests, and they usually just have more access to the herbs, and the herbs are not doing it well, not helping us to recover well enough. Type your questions in the question box, and I forgot to mention too that if you would like all of my notes on this topic and the shortened video version of this video, then make sure to comment the word tapeworm, and my team will send it over to you. So the word tapeworm, comment, direct message me on Instagram, wherever you find us. If you give us the word tapeworm, we will give you the link to all of this research so that you can have it at your fingertips. And I would really encourage you to share this with other people, start talking about it. And please do not try to treat yourselves, because again, when we have neurological diseases and we've got these little parasites in our brain, the little bladder sacs of the larva, or it could be other. We talked about how the roundworms can do the same thing. So there are multiple parasites that can get into the central nervous system, and you want to treat safely and you want to treat effectively. It is your life. If you are not able to find a practitioner right now, we have a plan. And the plan is the Live Disease-Free plan. And in that, number one, we know the importance of getting ready to treat. So when we decrease the food to the parasites significantly, we notice a lot of symptom improvements because we're decreasing inflammation. We are starting to promote modulation, immune modulation. All of the Live Disease-Free Diet guidelines are on our website, livediseasefree.com. In the main menu under Research, you will find the Live Disease-Free Diet guidelines. Start changing your diet. You will start to feel a lot better. The parasites will still be there, but they are going to be less active. You will notice inflammation going down. You will notice a lot of symptoms improving. If your carbs are low enough, that is the key. That diet is, and I'm going to be recording, hopefully today yet, I had a very long testimony from one of my students. She hasn't even started treating yet. And she had multiple diseases, multiple conditions. And just by following the diet, she has not even started passing the worms using the oxidizing agent. And she has this testimony, it's like about that long, that I'm going to be reading out. It's like mind blowing. For her, it's been mind blowing. So please use that. It's free. It's on our website, Live Disease Free. The Live Disease-Free Diet guidelines under Research. Start to change your diet today. Start to decrease the food, their favorite food, today. Start to feel better. It can be just within a few days that you're like, oh my gosh, this is working. So diet is number one. Then we make sure we're having daily bowel movements. We make sure we're sleeping well at night. If any of my students have any type of epilepsy or maybe seizure history, they definitely are going to talk to their practitioner about using a steroid, because just to be on the safe side. We've never had any issues, but that would be a wise thing to do. Talk to their practitioner and get a prescription. And they don't even need it for long. It's literally for, I'm not going to say when, because this is for educational purposes. So once we're ready to treat, once we're having daily bowel movements, we're sleeping well at night, we've cleaned up our environment for a few things, and our food, our nutrition is high, but the sugar and the carbs are low, and we're starting to feel noticeably better, then we can start treating. And so this is where we look at our health history, the health history of our parents. We look at our diagnoses. We look at the symptoms that we have. We look at the parasites that we're passing. So right from the start, we can start with these oxygen type enemas, and it's releasing worms. And so we can see what we're passing. And that is a really helpful way to determine which types of parasites we're dealing with. So with this oxygen type enema, the worms come out and they look very characteristic. They can look like a noodle, like a spaghetti noodle. They're rounder, they're long and skinny. They can look like a flat ribbon type, even a little wider than fettuccine noodle. You'll see some pictures or videos of what we believe are tapeworms. Of course, they haven't been analyzed in a lab, but they look very characteristic. They're wide, they're kind of like ribbon shaped. They can be segmented. Then the flukes, they would be no more than 5 inches long at the most. They can be thicker, like 1 centimeter or thicker wide. They're rubbery. They're translucent on one end. They're very characteristic. So those are the 3 types that we would visualize. There can be worms that are smaller that we don't see, but these are the larger worms that we can visualize just when we're passing them, thanks to this amazing oxygen therapy. So between getting our carbs down, doing the enemas, and then even starting with, like we're using raw garlic, it can be really shocking. And using that oxidizing agent, we can use it orally later. It's an oxygen type therapy, but once we're ready to treat. So it's remarkable the symptom improvements people can have. I have one lady who has been dealing with terrible MS, and she's just been also healing from this big lesion, or not lesion, a big sore on her lower leg. She's been just following the diet and supporting the body. And she started doing a few of the enemas, and she started using the oxidizing agent, and maybe using a little bit of garlic or just something similar like that. And she's actually back on her bike already, on her those stationary bikes. There's so much recovery that you can have that you never thought was possible. And the parasite drugs are not a magic cure. Our students do test well for 3 to 5 parasite drugs. They usually have to be used several together because these parasites are really happy inside of us. There's at least 20 feet of small intestine, then there's another 5 feet of large intestine, and it's folded over on top of each other. So these all little places they can hide in corners and in folds in the intestines. And so they're challenging to treat. So it takes multiple treatment cycles, but we're using the parasite drugs, we're using the herbs, and we're using the oxidizing agent and doing over multiple cycles. And it is truly miraculous what it is doing. And we have another young boy who was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at the age of 12. Early January, he went from being a healthy young man, a young boy, to being in a wheelchair immediately. His mom and dad were so scared. They didn't know what was going on. They found me. Now he is playing tennis again. He's completely recovered. He's been passing tons of worms, and he is completely recovered. They can't tell that he has MS, which is amazing. So there is so much hope, whether we're 12, 13 years old, whether we're in our 70s. If you feel that it's like, I would love to just enjoy the best quality of life for as long as I live, it'll help you. It'll help you more than you ever thought possible. And the exciting thing is that I can never promise full recovery, but what I can say is that you will have more recovery than you ever thought possible, that most of the damage is still in the inflammation stage, not in the permanent damage to myelin sheath. And if it's just inflammation, that can be reversed. So we have lots of people that have come out of wheelchairs, no longer use scooters, no longer use walkers, but they have to treat effectively, and they have to follow the plan, basically, right? And then see how much recovery you can have. It'll be life-changing experience. So number one is getting ready to treat, then using a very strategic plan over multiple cycles, incorporating herbs and the parasite drugs and oxygen therapy. It's called oxidative therapy. All of that together with lifestyle, all of that is really important. And people are month by month having just huge improvements. So please do not mess around with this. You will not figure this out. I really believe it's by the grace of God we're doing this work. It has taken 37 years of me studying. I have a science degree. I bring all this research out to you. It's easy to find, but it's by the grace of God. We have all these connections. We have the understanding from all the students we serve. And it is your answer. This is treating the root cause of why you're dealing with symptoms, why you're dealing with neurological symptoms. But you really need support because, number one, if people are really infested, they may not tolerate the treatments, right? And if they especially don't do the proper prep work at the start. So doctors in developed countries, they really believe that we don't have parasites. And it's funny because they probably have a pet and they probably deworm their pet regularly. Same with veterinarians. It's absolutely insane. They are working with sick animals all the time. They deworm horses and cattle and dogs and cats and all these different pets that we have, but they never deworm. So they're dealing with the sickest animals infested with the most parasites, and they don't treat themselves. Same thing with doctors. They don't know that their patients are infested with parasites, and they treat their dogs, and they're exposed to all these parasites, and they don't treat themselves. Think of all the people in the care homes, right? Where people are living on Depends. They have incontinence. They can't hold their bowels. So they're dealing with hundreds of thousands of eggs, cleaning people up all the time, and they don't treat themselves. It's, when you start to think about it, it's absolutely ludicrous. So why this is not part of our standard of care? Again, number one, doctors really don't believe that we have parasites in developed countries. And the tapeworm eggs, they are imported on the produce, and they come from our pets, they come from soil, from our loved ones, from eating in restaurants. It's part of life. The MacDonald criteria for how we diagnose MS and treat it, I don't know if it's in the 2024, but the 2017 MacDonald criteria, at that time, they found no value in looking for infections in the spinal fluid. We're not saying that this is an intentional deception, but there is no financial incentive to treat parasites. The newer MS disease-modifying drugs, the repurposed cancer chemotherapy drugs, they are upwards of over $100,000 a year, every single year, never mind all the MRIs, the visits to the hospital. It is an industry. I hope you see that through these series that I am helping you to understand that MS and other chronic diseases are infectious diseases, that the biggest drivers of the symptoms we're experiencing is dysbiosis. We're out of balance. We have different microbes out of balance. It's not just going to be the tapeworm, but this could be a very significant one, especially because we know that it likes to cross the blood-brain barrier. It's well understood in science. And so then if we understand that MS is an infectious disease, then what Dr. Alan MacDonald, I heard him, he was with Dr. Klinghardt and another doctor, they were talking, and it was like, if MS is an infectious disease and we are giving people immunosuppressive drugs, that is a recipe for disaster because you're already infested with the enemy, you're taking out or suppressing your soldiers. That just allows the enemy, the parasites, to just take over more ground more quickly because we're weaker. Our natural defense is compromised even more by the immunosuppressive drugs. So what Dr. Alan MacDonald found, I wish he would have got recognized for it. I wish he would get a Nobel Prize for it. He just looked. He was the first one to look. And what's so shocking is that veterinarians have known a lot of this for many years too, that these animals that get these parasites in the brain, they have very similar symptoms to MS. Why nobody's made the link between animals and humans, I have no idea, because we do know that these parasites cause disease and they can be transmitted to humans. If you would like all of this research and this information about the neurocysticercosis link to multiple sclerosis, make sure to comment the word tapeworm. If you're new to all of this, maybe this is the first time you found me, then go to livediseasefree.com and you'll see a blog. And in that blog, those are the articles that I write. And pick and choose the topics. You can scan my notes. You'll be blown away. It's a gold mine library there for you. So go through that. And then once you're like, okay, this makes so much sense. I cannot believe I found a jackpot here. Then start to change your diet. Go to the main homepage of livediseasefree.com. Under research, all the information about the diet, the Live Disease Free diet. Start to change your diet. Start to feel better. It can happen literally within a week if you get your carbs low enough. You'll start to see shifts that are just absolutely exciting and encouraging. And then when you get to that place, you're like, okay, I've been watching your stuff. I've been following you. I totally get it. I'm so ready to get these parasites out. I believe 100% in this whole approach. Then make sure to watch my masterclass training, because on that, it's a free training. You'll see it below this video. And there you will understand some of the common parasites involved with MS, the steps we take to recover, and some amazing successes from previous students that took this program. We're coming on 10 years now. So we've got a lot of people that were diagnosed even 10 years ago that are still living MS free, which is really exciting. So watch the training. And if you feel that you would like support, then make sure to fill in the form. So there's a link you can click on, fill in the form, and that will get the form. And then you can book a time in my calendar. Watch the coach-a-thon, because that really explains all the steps so that I'll save time. So you and I, when we meet, we can just talk about you, about what your health is like, what you've been through, your diagnosis, and any specific questions you have about this whole process to recover from these horrible parasites in the central nervous system and throughout the body. So if you enjoy what I share, please help us to get the word out by liking this video, sharing it with other people, and make sure to subscribe also. That way you will know when I go live again next week at 2 o'clock PST in the afternoon. So 2 p.m. PST on Wednesday next week. And I'll be talking about flukes. And that's something you may not know about, but boy, are they common in MS and chronic disease. And they are probably the most pro-inflammatory parasite. With that, I hope you have a wonderful week, and we will talk to you next week. Take care and bye-bye for now.